What if the crisis overwhelming today's teenage girls isn't just emotional? What if it's a viral epidemic, not of germs, but of ideas, emotions, and invisible wounds spreading faster than we can comprehend? This isn't paranoia. It's history repeating itself, only this time with likes, shares, and algorithmic accelerants. And the consequences are far more devastating than we've dared to admit. Let's pull back the curtain and ask the uncomfortable question. Why are so many young girls falling apart? And why now? For over 300 years, history has whispered a pattern too consistent to ignore. Young women have always shown a heightened sensitivity to what psychologists call social contagion, the emotional equivalent of catching a cold from someone else's despair. Back in the 18th and 19th centuries, it was hysteria in convents or fainting spells at schools. Today, it's anxiety, self-harm, and identity crises, shared, spread, and solidified online. Henry F. Ellenberger's book, The Discovery of the Unconscious, doesn't just explore Freud. It traces how collective emotional disturbances among women and girls long predated modern psychology. And now, in the age of Instagram and TikTok, the contagion has gone digital. But the big question remains, why girls? Why are they uniquely vulnerable? Start with biology. Girls, on average, are more agreeable and more attuned to negative emotions than boys. That's not a judgment. It's a well-documented trend across cultures and developmental studies. And it becomes particularly pronounced at puberty. Think about it. Adolescence brings not just hormonal surges, but a whole rewiring of the emotional brain. Girls become biologically more responsive to social cues, more sensitive to rejection, more prone to internalizing pain. These traits, while evolutionarily useful for nurturing and bonding, also make them exquisitely sensitive to emotional distress, especially when that distress is broadcast, filtered, and reinforced by peers on a screen. And puberty hits girls earlier. That means they're emotionally overloaded before their cognitive self-defense systems are even fully formed. Now add the pressure cooker of self-consciousness. A teenager's body is changing fast, awkward, visible, unfamiliar. And for girls, their worth has long been unfairly tied to how they look, not just by men, but often more harshly, by other girls. The camera flips on. She checks her face, adjusts, filters, scrolls, sees a girl crying into her sleeve with a caption about how much it hurts, and under it, 46,000 hearts. Suddenly, pain isn't private, it's social currency. And that's where things shift from bad to worse. Girls have always competed. But in the past, it was within limited social circles, peers at school, maybe the neighborhood. Now, the competition is global, the arena is endless, and the scoreboard updates every second with hearts, shares, comments. The image-based nature of today's social platforms, selfies, videos, short-form bursts of emotion, feeds directly into the vulnerability girls already carry. The front-facing camera becomes a microscope for every perceived flaw. The internet becomes a hall of mirrors reflecting back insecurity, comparison, and performance. What once was private angst becomes performance art. The more raw, the more visible. The more suffering, the more applause. And behind the scenes, algorithms ensure that the most extreme content rises to the top. Social contagion isn't just theory anymore. The data shows something alarming. A sharp, unnatural spike in self-harm and anxiety among preteen and teen girls around 2012 to 2013, the very moment Instagram's user base exploded. Now consider this. Behaviors like cutting or suicidal ideation are extremely rare in isolation. A child doesn't wake up and think of these things unprompted. But in online groups, especially unmoderated spaces where pain is validated without solution, these behaviors are modeled, repeated, even subtly rewarded. It's not malicious, it's mimicry, emotional resonance, a desperate attempt to belong. And it's spreading. This isn't just emotional contagion, it's reputational warfare. Here's a psychological truth. Male aggression is overt, often physical, and it always carries the implied threat of violence. But female aggression is more covert. It's social. It's reputational. And online platforms, with their anonymity and viral reach, amplify this form of harm with terrifying efficiency. Gossip apps, anonymous Q and As, spill the tea accounts, all weaponized to destroy with no consequences. Suddenly, the cruelty of middle school drama isn't confined to the cafeteria. It's global, permanent, and impossible to escape. And the scariest part? It works. Reputational savaging online garners attention, support, and even prestige. We've created a system that rewards cruelty disguised as transparency, pain disguised as connection. Here's a dark thought. What if social media enables not just sadness, but sociopathy? Online anonymity removes empathy. It removes accountability. And for those inclined toward manipulation or control, traits more common in psychopathy, the digital world becomes a playground. What's worse, the traits that once kept such behaviors in check, shame, fear of social backlash, adult supervision, are all stripped away. What's left is a toxic soup of emotional exploitation. And girls, biologically wired for social sensitivity, bear the brunt. Some might ask, what about the boys? The male trajectory is different, but no less troubling. At 14, boys often seem fine. Lost in video games and porn, their dopamine systems hijacked by stimulation without risk. They may not feel the emotional sting as sharply, but they drift into disconnection, loneliness, arrested development. By 28, the consequences appear: isolation, aimlessness, a loss of meaning. Suicide rates climb. But with girls, the collapse comes sooner. The self-destruction is visible, measurable, bleeding through the screen in real time. We're watching a generation emotionally unravel before our eyes. This isn't new. As early as the Middle Ages, there were reports of mass dancing hysteria, where girls collapsed in exhaustion after days of frenzied movement. The cause? Social contagion, shared stress, isolation, emotional intensity. Then it was isolated villages. Today, it's digital villages. Bigger, faster, and far more volatile. We can't ignore this anymore. We can't keep handing 12-year-old supercomputers with front-facing cameras and anonymous apps and pretending it's just harmless fun. This isn't prudishness, it's protection. Because the evidence is screaming. These platforms are not for children. Not emotionally, not neurologically, not developmentally. And while boys may escape visible harm for longer, girls are bleeding out in the open. If you think this is just about screen time, think again. This is about identity, community, belonging, visibility, pain, all tangled in a web of algorithms we no longer control. And unless we face it head-on, with courage, clarity, and compassion, we're going to lose more than just attention spans. We're going to lose our daughters.